Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosemary Mutia from Beteled IA3A. This afternoon, I will be discussing about sewing tools and equipment. I will be introducing to everyone the common tools and equipment that are used in sewing. At the end of this lesson, students are expected to define the tools and equipment used for sewing. Identify what are the sewing tools and equipment. Differentiate their uses and functions. And also, they can able to explain how important in knowing the tools and equipment in sewing. Let's start with sewing tools and equipment. Let's define first what is sewing tools and sewing equipment. Sewing tools is an instrument that aid accomplishing a sewing task. It can be manipulated by hands. With the sewing tools, it can be manipulated by hands or it can be used by a hand to accomplish a sewing task. However, a sewing equipment those are the more complicated tool. It provides to carry out a particular process or function. The more complicated tool. So you will be able to see those complicated tools later in our discussion. Let's start with measuring tools. It is an instrument used for obtaining quantities, dimensions, or forces of real-world objects. From the word measuring, it talks about numbers. As such, a measuring tools give you or help you to get an exact measurement or dimensions of an object. For instance, if you are going to draft a pattern. As you can see, under the measuring tools, we have the following. First, we have tape measure, sewing gauge, ruler, yardstick, L-square or Taylor square, French curve, and hip curve. Let's start with tape measure. A tape measure is a flexible measurement or a measuring device that have a 60-inch long that is used for taking body measurements, drafting patterns, and measuring fabrics. It has a metal tipped and reversible marking in centimeters and inches. A tape measure at the front part have 150 centimeters and 60 inches at the back part. The second one, we have a sewing gauge. A small ruler with a sliding guide, and it is about 6 inches long. This gauge is used for measurement at hemlines, buttonholes, and areas where other small measurements require checking such as pleats and tacks. As we can see, this tool is not usually used by what we call a designer. If it's needed for a designer to use this tool to further drafting a pattern, then this tool, which is the sewing gauge, is present and is being used. Okay, example presented. That is a sewing gauge. Let's proceed to the third one. We have a ruler. Okay, a ruler measuring 12 inches or even 18 inches, but it depends of what type of a ruler, either clear or solid. A use of a ruler is to connect lines or between two lines to have or to get a straight line or cutting lines. Clear ruler is also a good tool for making buttonholes. That is a ruler. So let's proceed to the fourth one. We have yardstick or meter stick. It's used to measure a fabric and to check grain line. It can be used in marking along straight lines and in measuring hem lengths. So why do you think a yardstick or a meter stick is used to measure a fabric instead of using a ruler? It's because a yardstick or a meter stick have a 3 feet long, rather than a ruler that is only have a 12 inches or 30 centimeter length. So again, a yardstick or meter stick had 3 feet long. That's why it's mentioned there It is used in marking along straight lines. L-square or a Taylor square is used to transfer a measurement to the draft pattern. With the use of L-square, we can construct perpendicular lines with divisional parts located in the left part, which is the longer arms, and the right part, which is the shorter arms. It divides the garment into the desired measurement. It has perfect squares and it is useful in making straight lines and numbers. It can also function as a tape measure. A French curve. This is used to shape the depth of the neck hole and armhole of the pattern. So a French curve is usually used if you are going to shape a neck hole and armhole of your blouse pattern. Other than that, by the use of French curve, the measurement with neck hole and armhole will be perfect and exact. The image presented is an example of a French curve. So if we have French curve, we have also a hip curve. It has a measure of inches and the front and centimeters at the back part. Hip curve is used for connecting or shaping slightly curved points. The image presented is an example of a hip curve. Now let's proceed to the cutting tools. Cutting tools is a pointed tool mounted in a machine tool and used for cutting materials. Cutting tools from the word cutting. It is used to cut anything. Let's for example fabric. So at this moment, you will be encountered complicated tool, as I mentioned earlier. So under cutting tools, we have bent-handled dressmaker shears and pinking shears. We have also cutting scissors, trimming scissors, embroidery scissors, buttonhole scissors, thread clippers, seam ripper, rotary cutter, and mat. Okay, let's proceed to the cutting tools. The first one, we have bent-handled dressmaker shears. Bent-handled dressmaking shears is a pair of scissors that are made of stainless steel. Blade and plastic handles are fine for lightweight fabrics. The blades move easily and cut smoothly along the entire length, and the points should come together. Bent-handled dressmaking shears is used to cut synthetic fabrics or slippery knits. The second cutting tools, we have pinking shears. This is popular in zigzagging or scallop, edge, or for seam finishes. This is used to finish seams and raw edges and to create decorative edges on many types of fabric. As you can see in the picture presented, the feature of pinking shears looks like a zigzag style. So now we are in the cutting scissors. Under cutting scissors, the first one, we have trimming scissors. It is 3 to 4 inches long. It is used for trimmings, clipping, threads, and snipping slashes. The image presented is an example of a trimming scissors. We have the second one, embroidery scissors. It has 4 to 5 inches finely tapered blades. Both points are sharp for use in working with fine details in delicate fabrics and embroidery work. So as you can see the difference between the two, the trimming scissors have only 3 to 4 inches long, so it's kinda short, while the embroidery scissors have 4 to 5 inches. So again, the image presented under embroidery scissors is an example. The third cutting scissors, we have buttonhole scissors. This is only intended for making buttonholes. So that is an example of a buttonhole scissors at the right part. So the type of scissors is only again intended for making buttonholes. Okay, we have the fourth cutting scissors. It is called a thread clippers. A thread clippers is a handy little spring-loaded cutting tool that allows for the snipping of threads. Wait. So this type of cutting scissor is intended only for cutting a thread, not a fabric. If there is a handy little cutting tool to cut a thread, there is also what we call a handy little tool for taking out seams and removing stitches. And that tool is what we called seam ripper. Seam rippers are specifically designed for ripping out stitches from seams either as a result of an error or during alterations. So we can avoid, we all know that during our sewing, we can avoid to make mistakes. So just use seam ripper to remove stitches. So we have the rotary cutter or mat. It is an adaptation of the giant rotary cutter used by the garment industry. Wait. When using rotary cutter, work on a cutting mat to protect the blade and cutting surface, just like the example image presented. Rotary cutter is available in different sizes with different blades. Okay, let's proceed to the marking tool. So marking tool, we have the first one, we have chalk pencils or dressmaker pencil. This is available in white or pastel shades. This chalk pencil is used to make fine lines on fabric, and it has an erasing brush at one end. As you can see in the image presented, it's not only available with white but also with other different colors. So there is also an erasing brush if you are have an error. So you just use chalk pencils or dressmaker pencil. Okay, let's proceed to the second one. Liquid marking pen. Liquid marking pen comes in two types. One type disappears after 48 hours. Another type washes off with water. An example presented is an example of a liquid marking pen. Let's proceed to the third marking tool. We have a tailor's chalk. A tailor's chalk is commonly used for marking fabrics in order to follow all the measurements written in the draft pattern that serve as a guide. The image presented is an example of a tailor's chalk. Okay, let's proceed to the waxed chalk. A waxed chalk can be removed by pressing. This is available in black or white, just like in the image presented. Is an example also of a waxed chalk. It is used for woolen fabrics. So what is a woolen fabrics? A woolen fabrics are fabrics that are warm and comfortable to wear and come in a variety of weights and textures. Tracing well. Okay, a tracing well, the serrated edge wheel produces dots on the fabric and is suitable for most type of fabrics. The smooth edge well is best for delicate fabrics and unlike the serrated edge will not pierce more delicate fabrics. The smooth edge well creates a solid line. So that is an example of a tracing well. Let's proceed to the carbon paper. The only rule of a carbon paper is to transfer the tracing mark to the fabric or to the paper. Let's proceed to the next one. We have pin cushion. A pin cushion is to keep a pin in place while working to avoid accident. Let's proceed to hand needle. A hand needle is used in making temporary stitches and buttonholes. Needle comes in different sizes. We have small, medium, and large. Small needles used on light and soft materials, while big needle is used for rough, thick, and heavy materials. So the image below is an example of needle. I know that you are already familiar with needle. So that's it. These are the common tools and equipment that are used in sewing. Now, let me ask you a question. Why is it important to know the tools and equipment used in sewing? What do you think? Why is it important? It is important because we can able to define exactly what it is a sewer does. You need to explore a basic classification of sewing tools and equipment and their uses. The importance of defining the tools and equipments in sewing comes in twofold. First, it will give you a way to calculate startup cost. Second, in learning the functions of sewing tools and equipment, you will be able to define exactly what sort of duties a person in this industry perform. Okay, that's all. Hope you learned something from my discussion, which is all about sewing tools and equipment. Again, I am Rosemary Mutia, saying thank you and God bless to everyone.